Hi guys, in this video we're going to be making Michelangelo from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and we're going to make his face as a cake. So I've got a dome shaped cake here. So it's a half sphere tin. I'll put links below, and with it being quite a thick cake, I've had it in the oven a while, so I've overcooked it just a little bit on the edges, but we'll be trimming off those edges. I've sliced it in half and we're going to buttercream it to a cake board and then a little bit of buttercream in the middle. Now, to stop it crumbling, I have actually put mine in the freezer for half an hour, so it is quite hard, is this cake, just to make it easier to carve into. So I've printed off a picture and I'm going to cut out his head so it gives me a rough idea of the shape. So I can see it's a little bit narrower at the top, so we're going to trim off a little bit off those top edges. And I'm just taking a little bit of the edging off the top half. And he's got a bit of a furrowed brow, so we're going to cut a little bit out there where his brow would go, and then a little bit off either side at the bottom, giving him a bit of a chin shape. And I'm going to mark where I want his eyes to be, and I want them to be set back a little bit, so I'm just cutting a little bit of the cake out so it's a little bit deeper in the eye area, and I'll curve that just a little bit above each eye or where the eyes are going to go, and then we'll create a slightly flat little plane under where the nose is going to go, and then I'll take a little piece out where I think the mouth's going to be. And I don't think I've got mine exactly right proportion wise, but it will do for this. And I'm going to cover the whole thing now in buttercream, so it's a little bit untidy looking at the moment, but that won't matter when we've iced it. I've got some fondant here, and I've just got the Ice Wise one that I'm using at the moment, and I'll put links below in the description box. And we're going to dye this a khaki colour, not too dark, because we'll paint it up afterwards to the right kind of colours. So we want to smooth it over the cake now, just working gently on any areas that we've put sort of indentations in for the eyes and the mouth. And then I'm going to make sure it's tucked in nice and tight around the edges, and then I'll trim off all that excess. And I'm just going to deepen the eyes a little bit more just by pushing in with my thumbs. And I'm going to give him a couple of creases in his forehead, just using one of my modelling tools just to put a couple of lines in. They don't have to be really deep. And I'm going to press now where I want his nostrils to go. And you don't need to press too hard because they're not that deep looking. And again, around the mouth, I'm just sticking my thumb in that little indentation that we made and my finger along the edge. And then with my thumb, hold where the top lip's going to be, and then you're going to sort of pull the icing from under his nose down to your other finger, which should start to create a top lip. See if you can see that, like that. And then we're just dragging the line a little bit further along either side with the modelling tool and sort of pressing an indentation at the very end of each of those lines. So bottom end of my modelling tool, which is a little rounded end, I'm just going to poke in for nostrils. Now they're reasonably far apart with his nostrils, and then just straighten up the lip a little bit. And I'm going to add his bottom lip as a separate piece, so a bit of a sausage shape. Make sure it comes to a point at either end, and we're just going to stick that in place under the top one. Just use your modelling tool or your finger to push that in place, and then we're going to add a couple of little crease lines on his lip, again just using the modelling tool, but you can use a cocktail stick if you prefer. So he's got a little scar on his chin, so I'm just putting a bit of a dint in with my modelling tool across there. Or I think he's got a scar, it looked like he did have on the picture. And then what I'm going to do is draw in some scales. So they're quite big on the top of the head and they get a little bit smaller as they come down. Just using the modelling tool, but if you prefer, if you've got like an impression mat of like cobblestones, you can use this instead. So we'll keep doing this right down the forehead. You don't need to come further down than where the band will go because it's going to cover up quite a lot of that work. So I'm going to cut out the eyes, pop that in place over the cake, and then we'll just mark on with the modelling tool where those eyes are going to go. So I'm just drawing around that outline and just defining his eyebrows a little bit more, and then pushing in nice and deep with the little modelling tool. Don't worry if you push through the fondant because we're adding white balls for the eyeballs. So white balls of the fondant, make a little oval shape and just push those in place, and then just a tiny little line underneath each one then with your modelling tool, and just make sure it's pushed nice and tight into the corner. And we'll put some little lines where his eyelids are going to go, and I think I'll actually stick a little bit of extra on for eyelids as well. Now there's a bit of a seam where we've stuck that on, so try and push it out with your modelling tool as much as you can. If not, don't panic too much because his mask will cover a lot of that up. So again, anywhere he's got wrinkles, creases and lines, just pop those in with your tool. So this is the impression mat for if you've got fed up of doing the scales by hand. You can just push that on. And I've got a round plunger cutter that I'm just going to pop into his eyes for circle shapes. Just gives me a bit of a guideline for when we paint on the eyes. And I've got an assortment of all different green edible dusts. And I'm using some deeper ones with a dry brush to just brush onto the lips. As you see on the picture, it looks much darker around his lip area. And then just mix it in with a tiny bit of the brown. And then what I'm going to do is brush it all over the face, but mainly working on the areas that are a bit more shadowed to start with, where I know it's going to be dark. And I'm not worried about getting a neat line, because we almost want it to look a little bit patchy. And you can again add a little bit of brown in with the green, and we'll go a little bit darker where his nostrils are and under the nose. So just keep referring back to your picture so you can see where is shaded for where you need to add the darker colours. And then as we do the rest of his face, you can just go a little bit lighter, so put a little bit less of the powder on your brush. And I'm going quite dark around the eyes, so I've mixed quite a bit of the brown and the darker green together, especially underneath his eyes. Just dab small sort of dots of it, anywhere where you want him to have a bit of a speckled look. And again, on the little scales that you've put on his head. And you can mix the different greens, have some scales one colour, some another. And then anywhere you want to be highlighted, we can go over with a bit of white. So now for the eyes, we're going to paint in those centre bits. So I'm starting with a grey for my base colour. And just mixing it with a tiny bit of water on a brush. And then I'm going to go over with a blue, a baby blue, over the top of that grey. And I'm keeping my baby blue darker at the very top and the outside edge of those eyes. So we want some black fondant, and we just want 2 small balls that we're going to push into the centre of each of those blue bits that you've painted in. Give them a bit of a push down so they're nice and flat. And then you want a smaller white one, or you can add 2, so it looks like the light reflecting in the eye. So now I've got an orangey colour for my bandana. Again, I've just got some Ice Wise fondant for this. If you want to make it a little bit firmer, you can just add a little bit of Tylose powder to this. I'm just going to make sure that it's long enough that it will go over his head. And then rather than cutting it to a neat line, I'm just sort of pulling my modelling tool along the edge to sort of tear it, because we want a nice jaggedy edge. Because in the picture, the fabric looks really torn. And I'm cutting out now around the eye for where this goes, so that I can mark it on my bandana, and I'll cut those areas out. I say cut, I'm sort of pulling them with my modelling tool again, so they still look a little bit torn. So it doesn't matter if you're not too neat with the bandana, because you want it to look torn and scruffy. So we've added a little bit of water to the forehead, and we're going to place his mask over the eyes. And then you can work on wrinkling it and putting creases in. So pull it around till you're happy with the positioning, so you know that you can see the eyes through the eye holes, that they're in the right places. Trim off the extra at the edges. And again, using the modelling tool, you can indent extra little lines and creases. You can fold it together with your fingers, so you can pull it around quite a bit. It's a little bit short in that bit, so I've just torn off an extra little bit that I'm just poking underneath. So I think I'm just going to go a little bit darker in the corner of the eyes now I've got this mask on. This is black that I've got this time that I'm going into the eyes with. And then you can also add this into all the creases on the mask. So don't forget, your shadowed bits will be deep in the creases. And a little bit of brown amongst the black as well. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching.